In the past, you could ask Google questions in any language. And what did Google answer with? Well, it said, well, here are 100+ million sites on this topic. And you can read all of them and then decide what the truth is. And it's your truth. Since 2023, you switch on ChatGPT and ask it a question. And what does ChatGPT tell you? One answer. It's that one answer is wholly positioned as the truth. That means that we are all becoming harmonized with the views of the reinforcement learning engineers of California. And the reality is that we are now at an age where a machine determines the truth. And that's probably a biggest wake-up call for humanity. I'm very proud to announce our next speaker, Helga Stemann. She's an expert on biases and impact of AI on society. As a user experience consultant with over 2 decades of experience, she founded Mentoray Africa in 2006, a UX agency dedicated to creating innovative products and services that embrace cultural diversity and inclusion across the African market. Today she will share her insights on how these language models shape cultures, economies, and power dynamics, with a special focus on Africa's diverse linguistic and social landscape. The theme of her talk is Decolonizing LLMs, a framework for AI in African context. Helga, my dear friend.
Hello, can everyone hear me okay? For some reason it's not actually, wait, let me just sort myself out. For some reason it's not actually doing it, but I want it to do. Sorry about that, let me unshare and share again. I think that will do the trick. Can everyone see my screen now? A little bit better. Okay, so let me get started. So thank you so much. Let's start with a little story. This is Tisfaya. He's a middle school student in Ethiopia. He received an assignment that he needed to research some local folk tales in Ethiopia. He did some canvassing, he spoke to some neighbors, spoke to his family for information, but he couldn't really get a lot of kind of information. So then he remembered ChatGPT had just launched in Ethiopia. So he decided to use this tool to research some folklore in his area. He is Amharic, he speaks Amharic, and his school is Amharic, but he has actually learned English as a second language and has decided to actually go and do some research on ChatGPT. So ChatGPT came up and gave him this wonderful story of Abba Otto, a shiny hero known for his selflessness, his generosity, basically the Robin Hood of Ethiopia. And he thought, oh, I'm going to be guaranteed an A for this assignment. Unfortunately, he failed. Why is that? Well, neither the story nor the character is Ethiopian. And LLM basically created a compelling story that weaved a lot of the Western characteristics of a hero into this folklore. This is a hypothetical example, and it is derived from an experiment that we used using an LLM and using our local Ethiopian researchers and community members. And it brings into relief the stakes of language technologies today and some of the potential hazards that it poses to our language and to culture. The erosion of linguistic diversity and the spread of misinformation, as well as the traditional knowledge transmission methods, all of this plays into the story. I know it's a simplified story, but it's still one of those that kind of highlights a lot of the risk that involves there. We are potentially allowing AI to write narratives for minority groups across areas where they haven't even written their own stories yet. And we haven't captured or documented their history yet. And AI is coming up with that one compelling narrative which does not speak about that customer's truth or that culture's truth in any kind of shape or form. So thank you so much, Edward, for the introduction. Hi, my name's Helga. I am the founder of Mentoray Africa, also EBCer. So that's how I know Edward. And we're a user experience, product and strategy company. We help businesses understand customers and understand cultural context to build products and services that are more easily adopted. We have helped many clients across many sectors, from fintech to health to social. We generally work in the tech space, and we help our customers with product market fit, monetization strategies, localization strategies, as well as usability testing, foundational research. We've also done other kind of research, which is research like social voice or civic integrity or mis and disinformation. Most of the time, we can't really speak about what we do because it's normally so strategic and gives our clients such an advantage and helps the product teams really create a product that aligns with the customer user base that we don't normally speak about it. So for today, I'll be chatting about a collaboration with Google and Bold Insight, our US business partner. And we're going to be chatting about some of our language and AI research we've done together over the past 3-4 years. We're going to be talking a little bit, and it is pretty unique for us. We haven't been able to do it. It's the first time we actually wrote a white paper together and we collaborated on this level. So I'm really excited to share some of the research we had found. We're going to talk a little bit. There is going to be a bit of a focus of the continent of Africa, but keep in mind that most of it can be applied to any kind of multilingual society. We're going to ground ourselves into some of the kind of contours and contrasts of what we've termed the Afro or African linguistic landscape or society, and the conversation around that. Next, we're going to be looking a little bit at colonial legacies and language and how that shaped Africa today, especially in context of what we call agency and being able to, and what it means for large language models and technology of large language models. Next, we'll also move into more tangible share, the research insights, and talk a little bit about some of those findings that we found. And finally, I'm going to be sharing also a framework for conducting ethnographic research. Now, I know you are a bunch of entrepreneurs and you're going to turn around and say, what the hell did you just say? These are all kind of good practice for developing products. This is, and it's a framework that will help you build ethical AI products by asking the right questions at the right time. So that's basically what I'm going to be covering today. So let's get started. So welcome to Africa, the second largest continent, and arguably the most linguistically rich continent that there is. Language is one of the principal ways that we communicate, make meaning, and embed our individual identities within our community. Africa owns roughly about 33% of the world's languages, and yet we only have 2.5% currently supported digitally. Machine translation tools with the most expansive language support like Google Translate, Neotrans, Alibaba Translate only cover roughly 50 languages represented in Africa. And this limited support, even by some of the programs and apps that work in the largest number of languages, stands to further kind of emphasize the dominance of English in the digital world. For those who simply use the internet to find and consume information, just over half of all websites are written in English. With Russian being the second most prevalent, at 5%, and the only African language without modern colonial roots that makes up greater than 1% is Arabic. And yet Arabic has a long layered history in Africa, with some of the Northern African and South Sudan regions actually seeing Arabic as a colonial language. So thinking a little bit more in language molds our understanding of the world, and our technologies embody those assumptions and of some of the makers of technology. Language is inherently fluid and flexible and multicultural. There's no language with a vibrant kind of speaker base can truly be considered as what they call a low resource language. Yet, in the computing world and in machine learning point of view, African languages are often seen as low resource languages, simply because there is just not enough written context. There's not enough of it is documented. There's not enough digital kind of context on it. Also, there's a variable teaching method, which also challenge machine learning development. So these numerous challenges to the language development contribute to many of these African languages being classified as what we call low resource languages. And then there's a broader thing around funding and infrastructure and how it's taught that also influence these languages not actually or falling into what they call the low resource kind of language. So that's one of the things that has really influenced these 33% of the language base of the world not being represented by language models. Colonization imposed what we call monolingual, monocultural, and monoeconomic systems onto Africa's diversity. So very similar to like a cornfield. Today's largest, most widely used LLMs are overwhelmingly trained by teams located in the US and trained to operate on unspecified variants of English text. The global deployment of these LLMs, or what we call a product of what we call WEIRD, which is an acronym that stands for Western Educated, Industrialized, Rich and Democratic, well, basically Silicon Valley, therefore risks to perpetuate its creators' unconscious biases and blind spots and presenting their worldview as the worldview to a global user base and expecting the results to be kind of unbiased, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever. When I think of Africa more like this. We are diverse. We are more closely defined to a national park and in the Congo. You know, we are just diverse, and I'd rather be this than a monoculture, to be honest. This is much more a true reflection of African culture, and I think it's a much more true reflection of the world's culture. We don't want monoculturalism. It doesn't work, and I don't think in any history we've seen monoculturalism work in any kind of way. There's contemporary views that often equate technology with tools that's designed for convenience and efficiency. There's this utilitarian perspective, which actually is a Western in its origin as well. But it contrasts the more philosophical way of thinking and ideas of technology as a way of revealing truth, which is kind of very often like philosophers like Plato and Aristotle kind of aimed towards those. Today, technology tends to be synonymous with the latest and the best kind of technology and the finest, and it's all about continuous development and the progress is implied. And yes, I know you're thinking, you know, let's stay utilitarian, you know, let's just build, you know, agents and these different things. But I would want to question and just challenge you a little bit to say, stay philosophical about it, you know. We need to also keep in mind this idea of truth. And it is a morally complex thing, and I don't think we should ignore it, because if we ignore it, it could be at the expense of diversity. AI is super exciting, but it has a lot of what we call unintended consequences. And we need to kind of think about it in a philosophical way as well. So I would definitely be that person that always go to diversity. I mean, my team speaks 95 languages, and we're crazy about language. So this is why this definitely kind of aligns more with that. I would hate to be a cornfield. I'd rather be a tropical forest, to be honest. So let's talk a little bit about ground truth. It's a term that's borrowed from machine learning, and it takes on a new meaning when it's applied to ethnographic research. In the world of AI and LLMs, we often hear that talk about what they call ground truth. And that's directly observable reality that the developers kind of strive for when they do modeling. But how we arrive at that truth and how we define it can be approached in very different ways. On the one hand, we have machine learning approach, which relies on heavily curated data sets and complex algorithms. And that data-driven process is essentially, but inherently limited to the data itself. So there's that concept of rubbish in, rubbish out. Ethnography, however, offers a different kind of path. It's a little bit more humanistic in its approach. It's about understanding that ground truth. It's about collaboration, working directly with local communities or experts. It demands self-reflection and acknowledging that you, the team, actually have assumptions and have potential biases. It's acknowledging it and actually documenting it. Crucially, it also requires that kind of cultural sensitivity and understanding the nuance of language, tradition, as well as that lived experience of that shape who people are and people's realities. This approach ensures that technology we develop reflects the true diversity of the human experience, especially for me, of course, within that linguistic, wild diversity field of Africa, cultural rich Africa. By incorporating some of these principles into our research, we can move towards decolonizing LLMs. We can force it to recognize context in a way and build technologies that really kind of empower rather than overpower local voices. And those are kind of important. So that's the kind of main difference to kind of think about. We've put the D in parentheses, as you can see, we've put the D of decolonization in parentheses, and we mean for it to really signify this continuous shuffling between what has been, what is, and what could be when we think about language and technology in Africa. There's definitely two main perspectives when speaking about decolonization, especially within in Africa. And there's two brilliant books. There's many more, and the white paper speaks to it. So please do go and read the white paper. But the one is very much positions that we should really reclaim and revitalize indigenous languages and really take some time to give it, to really focus on it. The other thinkers are kind of more in line of saying we need to acknowledge that it's complex and recognize that language in Africa is very complex. We have English, we have colonial and indigenous language, and they're deeply intertwined. It's an interesting kind of perspective to see, like Pidgin, for example. For a lot of people, it might sound English. It's not English. It's actually a very, very intertwined language. They are not, neither one of these perspectives are actually mutually exclusive. At the heart of it, of that Venn diagram that you see there is really agency. And it is ultimately how do we support decolonization of languages and technology in Africa so that we can really have that diversity and have exercise kind of agency through language. And the large language models are important to think about in that kind of way. So let's go to some examples. So the first example, this is for Swahili. There's 100 million people that speak Swahili. And if you look at the diagram, basically there's casual Swahili and formal Swahili. So we did this study in two countries, in Tanzania as well as in Kenya. Now, Kenyan Swahili is very casual, okay? Tanzanian Swahili is a little bit more formal, but not formal. And the large language generated Swahili learned from online Swahili, which is very much on the formal scale of things. So when we asked people, so how does this large language model Swahili, what do you think of it? Of course, we didn't tell them that it was a large language model. We just asked them to read some of these paragraphs and tell people what they think. We've done lots of studies in these two countries, and Swahili is a very contentious issue when we do studies generally there, because if you don't say it the right way, the Tanzanians would say, oh, that's Kenyan. The Kenyans would say that's Tanzanian. So when we introduced the large language models, Swahili, and asked them what they thought, well, the Kenyans actually opted for English. They actually went, you know what, I don't want to read that. That's definitely not my Swahili. I don't understand it. So I'll rather go for English. Thank you very much. The Tanzanians went, I'm a little bit more comfortable with the Swahili that you're showing me. However, there were parts where they said, I do feel a little bit excluded because it feels too formal for me. So interesting kind of finding. Swahili, that was a large language model generated, Swahili was not adopted as either Kenyan or Tanzanian. A different study that we did was a study on Zulu. Now, Zulu is a very complex language to write, and it is a very easy language to speak. Well, no, it's not an easy language to speak, but in this kind of research, what we actually did is we actually went to go and find out. We firstly had to go and recruit young Zulu speakers to find out more about, what they want. Firstly, all of their devices were in English. Zulu is one of those languages that have very, very long words. And in fact, I think the average size of a word is 25 characters. So it's a very, very long, extensive language. So young Zulu speakers don't have time for that. So they tend to just go for English versions of their actual devices and browsers. And when we wanted to try and actually do some localization, and it was a localization project, we had to do a lot of translation here. And so much so that we actually had to go and get linguists and actually local cultural experts to help us with the translation. And when we actually showed participants the mocks with these writing on it, they turned around and basically said that they don't understand it, that it's unfamiliar, that it sounded very old. It sounded like an elder speaking to them. So the spoken language of Zulu is completely different to the written Zulu, and therefore the two didn't actually marry each other at all. And for large language models, if you're only going to train your large language models on data written, it wouldn't actually be very good at Zulu, because actually the Zulu wasn't understood when written down. The third project or research that we looked at is we actually went and asked some of our UX researchers in 6 countries around how they use large language models. Firstly, most of them used it in English. And there was quite a few that actually liked how it helped them they praised large language models and felt that it was quite transformative and how it actually helped them with English. Some of the concerns that they had were very much around cultural sensitivity, data privacy, data rights. Those were most of the ethical concerns that came up. And then there were some other kind of poor performance, and that's around dialects, variations, idiomatic expressions, the fact that it doesn't know any, cultural nuances, and there's some syntax and grammar that goes missing as well. So interestingly enough, we are currently doing a study looking at between 16 and 35-year-olds, and Meta has launched something called Meta AI. It's launched in 22 countries, and 2 of those countries are in Africa. It's Nigeria and South Africa. I don't think it's launched in Europe yet. And actually, we wanted to see we are doing a study on the African youth, and we want to understand where does AI fall into the youth's frame of reference. And Meta AI came down strongly. So firstly, let me just some ideas of we're still busy with the study. It's not done yet, but this thing launched in August 2024, okay? And we've started getting insights from Nigeria. We have a 92% awareness of Meta AI in 6 months. It's just over 6 months, and a 92% awareness that Meta AI exists. We have an adoption of 78%, which is incredible for a tool that's just launched. Currently, it's seen as a replacement for Google search. So you've got masses of people using Meta AI and not going to be using Google search anymore. And they are doing some very, very unique things. It is a core place for finding information for them. It's also a core place to find things that are taboo. So mental health is one of those things that most Africans say, oh, mental health is a Western construct. It isn't, but now we know that it isn't because they are using Meta AI to help them with some of those taboo questions, and they're asking and becoming, Meta AI is becoming a companion for a lot of these youngsters. Also, it's helping them with imposter syndrome because it's actually learning how you communicate and puts it in really nice English. So a lot of the kids are asking ChatGPT to write a report. They take that text and then they put it into Meta AI, that personalized the text to text to sound more like them, and then they hand in the assignments. And somehow they are like bypassing that it's an AI generated result. So there's some of those things happening at the moment. It's super exciting. We're probably going to finish the research only in about a month's time, but I thought I'd highlight that research because it's absolutely crazy. And I'm quite excited about what's happening there. So overall, looking at key research from everything, language is complex and dynamic, and LLMs struggle with capturing that nuance of context. And context really, really matters. Designing LLMs that work for Africa in that non-weird way or non-weird world means that you have to have a contextual understanding. The younger generations navigate multilingual repertoires all the time, and we need to understand where they're coming from. The LLM's language strength and limitations are both real and potential benefits, provided that one can access them. So there's this idea of English centricity that is actually helping the models. And there is agency implications. So some of the users may avoid using large language models because it doesn't offer anything in their own language. Or they might actually accept the inaccuracy of the outputs because we know that there is a lot of hallucinations and a lot of biases that happen because we in Africa just don't have enough data yet. So it's making up stuff, and it's making up a lot of stuff and important stuff too. So we run the risk of our continent being potentially uninformed about its own history because it's written by LLMs. Yeah, so there's this idea, and there's this wonderful Ghanaian philosopher that says thinking about concept in English almost inevitably becomes thinking in English. And it's something to kind of think about. So in terms of a framework, I know I think, out of time almost. There's 5 parts to the framework. The framework prioritizes reflection, collaboration, local expertise, and respect for complex and dynamic relationships between technology and culture. So identify your assumptions and your team's positionality before you even begin designing anything. You need to recognize and you need to look the hard look in the mirror to say, hey, as humans, what assumptions am I bringing to the table? Are we aware of the limits of our knowledge about the African context or about any kind of cultural context? This kind of is a pre-step and essential to planning or executing any kind of research. But it also is the same idea when you're doing product development. Co-design to empower local voices, involve the community members, local experts throughout your process, make use of what we call participatory research methods, start building equal partnerships and with local researchers and communities, and start listening to what they have to say. We very often have people coming to us saying, oh, I want to design a female inclusive fintech product, in this country. And then we say, well, let's set up some communities for you to actually understand what women are going through when we talk about female inclusive fintechs. And very often they are very surprised by the outcomes there. So recognize that there may be cultural norms to follow that may limit what you can do as well. Recruit and inform participants with care. So really inform them what they're actually going to be involved with. We have seen some very weird things coming on from that side. And prioritize what we call grounded input in data collection and grounded output and synthesis. So anchor your research within the local teams, involvement, creating that deep connection with the community, and provide nuanced understanding of that cultural context, because cultural context is complex. And if you don't have the local community involved, you might actually miss very, very, very big things that you would want to put in. And, create that kind of social research artifact, that kind of drive for impact, and that's really the end of it. So practically prioritize that novel, evolve, impact. Large language models are exciting, but you kind of have to rewrite it and rethink it, especially within oral narratives and things like that. I am going to stop there. Any questions?
Before we go to questions, Helga, I want to thank you for your inspirational talk. And talking about eating your own dog food, you casually slipped in that you have 95 languages represented in your company. That didn't go unnoticed.
Well, we have to be. I mean, we have to be. We do a lot of language studies. That's what we do. If we don't have people that can actually speak the local language, we can't give the local context. So a lot of the time when we do research, our moderators have to speak the local language. Otherwise, we can't communicate with them. So it's an important one.
Another question I have is, you've presented the results of your studies to the big tech AI companies in the US. How involved are they with this problem? Is it high on the agenda? Is it even on their agenda? What is their general reaction?
Look, I mean, we've been working with them for 3 years. It is high on their agenda. They are very cognizant of it. So yes, no, it is something that it's important to them. So yeah, no, I mean, over the last few years, yes, we've been very involved with it, and it is something that is important. I mean, this framework is actually created with Google. I mean, this is not just our framework. Of course, we use this framework because we do a lot of studies, but it is with both tech and us together. So.
Okay. We're having a table discussion here. Marcus, what is it that came up? What kind of question?
Yes, we actually do have a question, and we were wondering if you see similar issues on other continents but Africa.
Absolutely. And that's why I said, this is I'm skewing it very much to Africa, but actually most of our research is what we call global South research. So this is found in Asia, in South America, but it's found across the continent, across the world, especially if you're doing a global product. LLMs doesn't speak every language, and it just doesn't understand all of that context. It only think about, English is a second language for me as well. If I think about my roots and where I'm from, and I think of my family conversations, they are a lot deeper in the first or in the mother tongue. And large language models don't have that. Large language models have English as its base. And yes, now you have other language models that's coming in with other languages, but some of that, the gritty context of cultures is not there, because we're being very productive and utilitarian about LLMs, and somehow we're missing the nuance of culture.
Well, thank you, Helga.